gorilla in the room is the pharmaceutical industry. The drug companies spend something like $80 billion a year on marketing and lobbying. They spend much, much less on research, and most of the research they do is really a tool of marketing, not developing new products.
Let's go back to the start of this disease model in the 1980s, okay? Now, the first drug that was tested in this new era was Xanax, alprazolam, for panic disorder. And here was the study they conducted. They compared Xanax versus a placebo group, and the primary outcome measure was the number of panic attacks on average per week. And after 4 weeks, Xanax was doing better. Fewer panic attacks. At 8 weeks, the Xanax patients were doing no better than placebo. And then at the end of 14 weeks, the Xanax patients were doing worse than they were at the beginning, and much, much worse than the placebo patients. The trial told of harm done. It told of people who were going to get addicted. When they came off, they'd have all sorts of withdrawal symptoms, and some people unable to get off, okay? That's what the study showed. What did they report? They didn't report the 8-week results. They focused on the 4-week results because that was the story that told of an effective new treatment for panic disorder and completely hid the 14-week results. Pretty soon, Xanax became one of the best-selling drugs in the country. It is still prescribed left and right. And what did we have in the early 80s? A story of science that told of harm done.
The longer you take a study out, the more likely you are to see people not doing well on that drug, right? Or developing side effects from that drug. So the pharmaceutical industry doesn't favor long-term studies for monetary reasons and for outcome reasons. They don't want to show that their drug actually doesn't do well.
There's as much marketing in the tests that are devised to measure the outcomes, in the investigators that are hired to conduct the study. All of that stuff is marketing, but it's presented and manufactured and published as science.
So here's how it's done and how it was done. They funneled all sorts of money to what are called thought leaders, academic psychiatrists at prestigious American universities, Harvard, Stanford, Johns Hopkins. And those academic psychiatrists began working for the drug companies as consultants, serving as their speakers, advisors, etc. You would start with a clinical study of the drug. But who's designing the study? The pharmaceutical companies. They know how to design it to make their drug look good. That's step one. Who then analyzes the data? Well, their own people do it. It's done by the drug companies themselves. Third, then, who writes the papers? It's actually ghostwriters hired by the drug companies to write up the study. They now present this study to the people that they want to be the big names of the study, and then those thought leaders basically sign off on the ghostwritten papers, and they become, quote, the authors of the published paper. The former editors of the medical journals like JAMA and New England Journal of Medicine and BMJ, British Medical Journal, they've all said that, like, basically we became vehicles for story laundering. It was a corrupted creation of an evidence base. Now, I'm a practicing doctor in some town. What am I going to believe? Well, I'm going to believe, Mr. Dr. Bigwig at Harvard University, that this is the best science. So my obligation is to use the very drug they say is so great. So, for example, Prozac. Prozac didn't really work in the trials. Prozac had all sorts of adverse effects. And those of us who are old enough to remember when Prozac came to market, the drug itself was on the cover of magazines. Our powers are such now that we can give you whatever personality you want. That's how great our knowledge is advancing. That was the story told. What did science tell us? Did you know what they found? In the 1970s. Very first studies done in Germany. What do they see? All sorts of psychotic events, worsening of depression, homicidal, suicidal impulses, so much that the German authorities said, this is a dangerous drug. We're not going to approve it. And now go read the studies that were reported by the Americans. The psychosis is gone. The homicidal problems are gone. Imagine you're a mother, and I know mothers, who said to their kid who got depressed over breaking up with a girl or something like that. The doctor says, oh, Prozac doesn't increase suicide risk. And then a week later, that kid hangs himself. That's in a real case. Can you think of any worse corruption of that?
It has been shown that half of the deaths that occur in psychiatric drug trials, they're never published. They disappear. You have an expression in America, torture your data until they confess. And this happens all the time. The difference between an honest data analysis and one you have manipulated can be worth billions on the world market. So what do you think they'll do?
Don't worry.